profesoriui Anthony Gleesui, kuris yra Beckingemo universiteto profesorius, šio universiteto saugumo ir žvalgybos studijų centro vadovas.
And now I would like to introduce to you Professor Anthony Glees, who is a professor at Buckingham University and head of the Center for Security and Intelligence Studies.
Ir jo pranešimo tema Sienos ir pasieniai.
And the topic of his presentation is walls, borders and frontiers.
The floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for asking me to come from the United Kingdom to speak to you.
Labas rytas, ponios ir ponai. Labai dėkoju už kvietimą atvykti čia iš Jungtinės Karalystės ir kalbėti su jumis.
It's a very great honor to come to Lithuania, a country full of brave people.
Man labai didelė garbė atvykti į Lietuvą, į šalį pilną narsių žmonių.
Who probably know more about borders and walls than almost every other European people.
Kurie apie visokias sienas tikriausiai žino daugiau negu bet kuri kita Europos tauta.
And excuse my pronunciation, please. I would particularly like to thank curator Antanas Galias.
Ir aš atsiprašau už tarimą, bet ypatingai norėčiau padėkoti kuratoriui Antanui Gailiui.
Lina Motsimian.
Lina Motuzienė.
And Arturas Vasilas Auskus of the British Council, who have made this visit possible. So, I don't know now whether you just want me to read because you have a text and so we won't. I'm just going to say two other things that aren't in the text because I listened with great interest to what was said yesterday.
Aš norėčiau pasakyti du dalykus prieš pradėdamas skaityti jo patį pranešimą, kurį visi turit lietuviškai, taip? Čia išdalinau. Nes vakar labai susidomėjęs klausiau kitų pranešimų.
You've invited me to reflect on history and politics.
Jūs mane pakvietėte apmąstyti istorijos ir politikos.
History and the history of politics is about continuities and discontinuities, complexities and contexts.
Istorija ir politikos istorija sudaro testinumai ir pertrūkiai, painiava ir jo sudėtingumas.
Not just to justify the past and not to predict the future, but to warn what could happen.
Ir tai reikalinga ne vien pateisinti praeičiai ir ne vien nuspėti ateičiai, bet ir įspėti dėl to, kas gali nutikti.
The second opening comment is, as I said to the man who talked about Yugoslavia and eternity, the time of communism, for me, much of this is personal.
Antras dalykas, kurį norėjau pasakyti prieš pranešimą, yra, kaip vakar sakiau Nikodemui Šiglovskiui, kuris kalbėjo apie Jugoslaviją ir amžinybę. Man daug kas iš to, apie ką čia kalbame, yra asmeniška.
I was born in 1948.
Aš gimiau 1948,
the time of the Berlin airlift.
Berlyno oro tilto metu.
When I was 12 years old, I went with my parents from Britain to Berlin. They had just built the wall.
Kai man buvo 12 metų, aš su tėvais nuvykau iš Britanijos į Berlyną ir ten buvo ką tik pastatyta siena.
In 1989, when I was a professor at Brunel University, another English university,
1989, kai buvau Brunelio universiteto, kito Anglijos universiteto profesorius.
With my students, I was in Berlin when the wall came down.
Su savo studentais buvau Berlyne tuo metu, kai siena griuvo.
I can recall asking the head of British intelligence in Berlin, in the English sector,
Atsimenu, kaip klausiau Britų žvalgybos vadovo Berlyne, anglų sektoriuje,
how much warning he had given the British government that the wall was coming down.
kaip labai iš anksto jisai įspėjo Britų vyriausybę, kad siena grius.
He said none.
Jis sakė, nei kiek.
He'd heard it on the radio when it had already started.
Jis išgirdo apie tai per radiją, kai buvo jau pradėta griauti.
So you've asked me to reflect on the political role played by borders and walls in Europe today, set in the context of examples of how walls and borders were used in the last century.
Taigi jūs pakvietėte mane.
This is the text I'm now reading from, so more or less the text I'm reading. You'll see. And to show how borders and walls and borders and security have shaped the development of Europe since 1945. And what I'm going to suggest to you this morning is that borders and walls and frontiers, which are interesting that in Lithuanian it's the same word, that borders, walls, and frontiers are an expression of human needs. But like all human needs, there is a paradox to them and a logical dissonance. On the one hand, humans want the security of borders and walls, but on the other, liberty requires them to seek to escape them. And this is the paradox. Borders and walls can inhibit liberty, but they can also protect liberty, a point I don't need to make to people who live a few kilometers away from Russia. Borders and walls, though, are not frontiers conceptually. You may have seen the TV series Star Trek when I was a school student. It was the thing to watch on television. It always began space, the final frontier. And final because there were no longer frontiers to be reached on Earth. Everything on Earth had been discovered. Frontier was an idea of expansionism, and a positive idea, taken not least from the experience of Europe in other parts of the world, colonialism, and of course, the United States of America. And there is a symbol of the paradox that lies in this theme, in the fact that, on the one hand, the United States of America has grown out of a wish to extend the frontier of America westward, but on the other has generated an American president, Donald J. Trump, of German origin and Scottish origin, whose big policy commitment is to a wall. So there's a huge cognitive dissonance, even if you're an American, where America's power came from the idea of a frontier that would extend even into space. At the same time, you build walls to keep people out. And what I'm going to say is this: there is a political point in stressing this dissonance, because unless those who support the idea of a European Union understand that on the one hand people don't want borders, but on the other hand they do want borders, then I think the idea of Europe will be destroyed by the same nationalistic and populist forces that ravaged Europe in the last century, the century before that, etc., etc., etc. So the intellectual point in this symposium is to square the circle, to imagine ways in which people can both live without borders and frontiers, but also be secure within borders and frontiers. I don't have the answer, I'm afraid. I would get the Nobel Prize if I did, but that is my point. Here, in Lithuania, the fact that this is the 30th anniversary of the great popular movement of 1989, when everywhere in Eastern Europe, basically ordinary people, people like you, ladies and gentlemen, gave up your fear of the secret police, gave up your fear of the Soviet security apparatus, and in the Baltic War, you know it all, joined hands to say, enough, we've had enough of this. We celebrate this rightly, but I have to say, as someone who comes from the United Kingdom, there's very little attention to what happened in Europe 30 years ago. I scarcely can think of one or two television, radio programs. The Baltic Wall, what's the Baltic Wall? Nobody would talk about that. Yes, the fall of the Berlin Wall, some people might say. Why is that? That is because my own country, the United Kingdom, is going in a completely different journey. A journey which is about erecting new borders and walls, and new borders and walls against you. You, your people, are one of the main reasons that my people voted for Brexit. Your people enjoying free movement of labour and the lack of borders have been turned into hostile images by the Brexit Party, and particularly, of course, Nigel Farage, the most effective demagogue, the most effective populist demagogue in Britain for at least 25 years. So, somewhere borders have opened and we celebrate it, somewhere borders are closing and we must be aware of it. I should just add briefly, please do not forget that in my own country, this view of Britain's future, separated by borders from you in Europe, is a majority view as far as we can tell, but only just. 52% voted to Brexit, 48% voted to remain. We remain a country in chaos, we remain a country divided. And no, today we do not know what the future of the United Kingdom will look like. We should also not forget, as we discussed yesterday, that even if communism in Europe has, to all intents and purposes, been removed, Russian power and Russian dominance in the eastern part of the continent, here where we are, continues to represent a major threat to all those who share a border with Russia. If 1989 removed the specific borders that divided East and West Europe, other borders have sprung up to take their place. Ukraine, Crimea, You in the Baltic republics are protected, as you know, by the secure shield of NATO. But you won't find anybody who will argue that shield is not needed. That shield has become redundant. You, more than anybody else in the United Kingdom, understand the power of the S-400 missile that are confronting you a few kilometers down the road from here. Now, in my paper to you, take it away, you could wrap your sandwiches in it, I point out, as other speakers, of course, when I was writing this, I didn't know what other speakers would say, and I'm not going to repeat what they've said about Rome, about other borders. All I would perhaps add is that without walls and borders, particularly in Italy, we would not have the civilization that we have at the moment in Europe. The walls and borders of the states, the independent states of Italy that produced the Renaissance, were critical in allowing free thinking to develop within that space, as Stephen Greenblatt describes in a wonderful book called The Swerve. I don't know if it's been translated into Lithuanian. That would be a good thing to do it. And in his book, he talks about the dangers of an unwalled city. That an unwalled city means the arts, culture can too easily be destroyed by barbarians who are stronger. I also would add that borders and walls exist not just to distinguish the essence of one state from another, but that they express at a very fundamental level the right of sovereign states and the power of its governments to regulate entry and deny it, constraining freedom to those who may wish to enter it. And it's a point perhaps we come back to at the end. As we have seen since 2015 in particular, the flood of migration into Europe via Arab North Africa shows that borders and walls are political, they are economic, and if they are not upheld, they undermine the security of the states that seek to promote openness and free movement. Particularly the case in Germany, particularly the case with Frau Merkel, who, with the most humane Christian motives, I have no doubt at all, her motives were fine, but in letting in 1.5 million people, 1.15 million, we're not quite sure, without knowing who they were, without who fueled the very populism that could destroy the idea of Europe. You would not have had, in my view, the vote for Brexit. It would not have been 52% if the European Union had properly secured its external borders. So that is what we have to live with. The idea of a European community in which state sovereignty was pooled in the interests of political and economic goals has, of course, changed the idea of borders again. We have to underline the fact that it was deliberate. It was the construction of the European community was a deliberate attempt to remove from European politics borders and walls that had generated in the last century 2 world wars and led to the deaths of countless millions of people. The First and Second World Wars were about more than territory and controlling territory, but territory and the control of territory lay at the heart of the ill will and bad feeling that existed between European states, in particular, of course, France and Germany. Never forget, ladies and gentlemen, that the German Reich of 1870, the Reich forged by Bismarck, was announced to the world in the Palace of Versailles in 1871, a symbol of Prussian and German domination of France, leading to the creation of a German Reich in Europe. And at the same time, that humiliation that the Prussians had given to France fueled further resentment. So when the fathers of the European community thought about prosperity, they also thought about peace. And when they thought about peace, they thought about intertwining the economies of Europe so closely that you could never have a nationalistic conflict any longer. It was simply impossible. You can see the success of that in the debate in my own country over Brexit over the past 3 years. We are so interconnected to the economies of continental Europe in Britain that it's easy to say, let's get out of Europe. You can say that easily. We don't like the Europeans, we want borders and frontiers, borders and walls back again. But to actually do it is almost impossible. The economic relationships built over 40 years in Britain need more than 40 months to dissolve, and many people believe it is actually impossible. That was the intention. So, as we go through history in the last century, we see how borders, how territory, how the conflict between states produced war. Again, I can't think of speaking to an audience in any country who will not understand this better than this particular audience. The extent to which the Hitler-Stalin Pact in 1939 not only raised the question of frontiers and borders, but destroyed the independence of your own country and the other Baltic republics, as well as Poland, at a stroke. Again, borders, walls, frontiers for the German Reich, the Third Reich, and indeed the Soviet Union. We know that the ideas were crazy on both sides. Hitler wanted your country and other countries to extend the Lebensraum of the Germans at the same time as encouraging Germans to have lots and lots of children, because he needed people to populate the lands that he said he needed because there were so many Germans. It was ridiculous. And at the same time, Stalin, as we've seen in a book, I quote by Tim Bouverie, a very recent book, right up to the day of the 22nd of June 1941, Stalin believed that Hitler did not want to fight with him. Did not believe it, and thought that he could make a deal with this murderous dictator. Then Hitler reintroduced not just arguments and fights about territory and about where the frontiers should be. You know the story again better than most people of the Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia, and how a British Prime Minister gave Hitler everything he asked for on the grounds that the country, Czechoslovakia, that they were dealing with was a faraway country of whose people we know nothing. So, failing to understand that if you feed the tiger, sooner or later, when the tiger gets hungry again, he'll eat you. You know the story of the Third Reich and its destruction by the Great Wartime Alliance. You know too that many Europeans found it hard to understand once Hitler and the Third Reich had been destroyed. Once again, frontiers and borders and walls were installed, which served to show that expansionism, particularly by the Soviet Union, would be the order of the day. Particularly the people of Poland, particularly the people of the Baltic republics, felt very great bitterness. They had suffered terribly. Their enemy, Nazi Germany, had been defeated, but the winner was another enemy, the Soviet Union. How did you make sense of this? How did you deal with that intellectually? And it has been argued by many people, also in my own country, that there was a secret deal between Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt to divide Europe, to do the very things that led to so many years of repression in Eastern Europe, the exchange of one dictator for another. And as the curator Glees said yesterday, it's important that we stop asking who was worse, Hitler or Stalin, both with a bad side of evil. But is it true that it was a deliberate wish? I argue, suggested it yesterday, that actually I think it was ignorance. What divided Europe was ignorance, particularly ignorance on the part of Churchill and the part of Roosevelt. They did not want to properly understand the nature of Stalinist communism. They did not want to understand it because they needed Stalinist communism to help them win the war against Hitler. So there's always two kinds of ignorance in life, ladies and gentlemen. The ignorance you have because you choose to have it, and the ignorance you have because you are genuinely ignorant. And I don't know which ignorance it was, but certainly we do know that in 1945, not least because our intelligence community in Britain had been put out of action during the alliance with the Soviet Union in its operations against the Soviet Union, we were blind about Soviet intentions. The Soviets in 1942 had signed a treaty with the United Kingdom and then with the United States, in which Stalin solemnly committed himself to not seeking territorial aggrandizement and to the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of the European peoples. And both the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom said they shared the goal of safeguarding and strengthening the economic and political independence of all countries. That was a complete lie, a total lie on the part of Stalin. In my view, he had always intended that whoever armies liberated countries from the Nazis, those would be the armies that would control the political and economic systems of those countries. There was never any question. In my printed talk, I give you some examples of the ignorance, the wishful thinking of Churchill, who in 1940, the time of the war between Finland and the Soviet Union, had said, everyone can now see how communism rots the soul of a nation. And he talked about the similar barbarisms of Nazi and Bolshevik. But a little over 1 year later, on the evening of the 22nd of June, 1941, the outbreak of Operation Barbarossa, when the German armies went through these lands like a hot knife through butter, Churchill said the complete reverse. No one has been a more consistent opponent of communism than I have for 25 years. But the past, with all its crimes, flashes away. It all fades away before the spectacle which is now unfolding. I see the Russian soldiers, not the Soviet soldiers, the Russian soldiers, guarding the fields which their fathers have tilled since time immemorial. I see them guarding their homes where mothers and wives pray. I see the 10,000 villages of Russia where maidens laugh and children play. I see advancing upon all this in hideous onslaught the Nazi war machine. The Russian danger is therefore our danger, just as the cause of any Russian fighting for his hearth and home is the cause of free people in every quarter of the globe. So this complete reversal. In 1943, friend of Churchill's, senior intelligence officer making contact with Tito, they always were keen on Tito in Britain, said to Churchill he was worried that Tito was basically a communist. And Churchill looked at him, barked at him and said, "Do you intend to make Yugoslavia your home after the war?" And Maclean said, "No, sir." I replied. Churchill added, "Neither do I. And that being so, the less you and I worry about the form of government they set up, the better." So, was this imposed ignorance? Was it genuine ignorance? I would believe it was probably a mixture of both. They didn't want to know, but the great outcome of this was the division of Europe. And as I mentioned yesterday, Churchill was also shaky on what that division would mean. Fulton, Missouri, 1946, when in East Germany, the communists, aided by Soviet secret police, were busy taking control. Within days of the fall of Hitler, the communists were ready and extending power over the people of Eastern Germany. A year later, Churchill could still say that there had been an iron curtain from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic. And it's true, as a lady pointed out, that he said, behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe: Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, etc. But I still think that Churchill had very little idea that once the Red Army occupied a territory, communism would be imposed and would not leave. How this panned out was, of course, seen in Berlin. And the focus on Berlin is appropriate. As I say, I visited it a great deal myself. It's a lady here in front said, "Oh, you should see me on German television." It is amazing for me to go to the German TV studios 200 meters from the Brandenburg Gate and be able to walk through it. I never ever thought that would be possible. And when the wall came down, I had a very nice letter from a former student of mine who said, "Professor, you must be delighted that your prediction that the Berlin Wall would collapse has come true. I remember your lectures where you said the Berlin Wall would always fall one day or another. It was all a complete lie. I never said it. I always thought the complete reverse. I thought they would never disappear. I thought the East Germans would always be there. As a British politician once said, the thing about the Germans is they can make anything work, even communism. And I believe so. It is the truth that as Timothy Garton Ash, a colleague from Oxford, had the same supervisor, he put this in a very good way. He writes very well. Even if you did not see it, there was, even in the 1980s, one great divide. There was a reality of Eastern Europe and a reality of Western Europe. And you knew when you crossed the line. If you lived at the bottom end of the Friedrichstrasse in Berlin, you got liberal democracy, the Americans, the European community, the Costa del Sol, the Volkswagen and McDonald's. Your brother, who lived 3 blocks up the road, got communism, the Russians, Comecon, the Black Sea, the Trabant, and Soyanka. I should say I like Soyanka greatly. And Garton Ash concludes, this was the Yalta division of Europe, distinguished by its absoluteness, nuclear-armed superpowers. And anybody imagining that this would come to an end would, I think, have been seen mad. But you, the people, 30 years ago, decided, nuclear weapons or no nuclear weapons, you had had enough of it. And that was a populist movement of great importance and significance, a point to which we come back again. Now, I also in my paper discuss the causes of the fall of the wall. Again, quote from Tim Garton Ash saying, how do you spell German reunification? You spell it H-U-N-G-A-R-Y, Hungary. Because if the Hungarian government had not allowed its border to open, probably, he says, the East Germans would have done in the great cities of East Germany, Dresden, Leipzig, and East Berlin, what the Chinese did in Tiananmen Square. Fire once again on their own people. But it didn't happen. So I discussed too where it came from, the curious, illogical in a way, policy of Willy Brandt, whom again I had personal experience of, and I saw him in person with his policy, the German phrase Wandel durch Annäherung, changing the situation by getting close to the people on the other side. And I think what Brandt thought by that was that both sides would change, that by getting closer to the communist world would get closer to us. And that was, of course, a feeling of fear. And Brandt himself did not understand that the populist movement that was uprooting the Soviet domination of Eastern Europe was an anti-communist movement. He didn't really see that because he thought, oh, you know, we'll both change. But no, it wasn't. It wasn't that way. And the change was in part, I would say in large part, the fact that the European community shone like a beacon of bright light to people in Central and Eastern Europe, that there was another way of not just managing your politics, but also managing your economics, and that liberty would be extended. So, we come now to the end of my comment, and this is in a way where I throw things to you, because I say there is a logical dissonance here, that on the one hand, we have benefited, including the United Kingdom, from a Europe which increasingly has destroyed the ideas of borders and walls and promoted the idea of freedom, particularly the freedom of people to move and the freedom of people to work, and if you're a professor, the freedom of the people to study. These are deep cultural freedoms. When the European Parliament was reopened a few weeks ago, you may recall that a group of young musicians played a theme, a sort of Beethoven Ode to Joy theme, in a kind of little wind quintet. And all the newly elected Brexit Party members from Britain turned their backs to the young musicians and faced the wall. For me, it was similar to the way in which Nazis and communists burnt books they didn't like. A terrible act of genuine barbarism. It seemed to me that has shamed my country, even though I didn't vote for these people. So we have benefited from the European Union. We have benefited above all from the culture. Ladies and gentlemen, our culture is predominantly European and not national. Beethoven sounds as good in Britain as it does here in Lithuania. So these were very important things, and yet we have voted to throw them away. We have voted to get rid of them. And we have voted to get rid of them because of a populist movement which was invigorated and given life by a demagogue, Nigel Farage, who is in love with his own mouth, as other demagogues have been, including, of course, Adolf Hitler. And I'm not saying Nigel Farage is a Hitler, but I am saying he is a demagogue just as Hitler was a demagogue. In my opinion, we have made a mistake in Britain, which we must honor. We cannot say we believe in democracy and say a decision taken by 52 people can be put in the dustbin. I don't think it's possible, even though that decision was helped in part by Putin and his friends, who have never made a secret that what he wants more than anything else is the European Union to be destroyed. And Trump, the idiot in the White House, he wants it too. He wants it too. They say that's openly what they want. So the challenge is for Europe to, and the people of Europe, to understand how they can have an effective security barrier against those people who want to destroy them. And that is the trick. The trick is, on the one hand, to have a space in which people can move freely, can think freely, can practice their religion freely, in which violence against those who are ethnically other, all these things, is outlawed, whilst at the same time keeping a strong barrier to make sure that those who have liberty continue to have liberty. Without a strong border, let us call it the NATO border in the east, without that, you become a frontier for the for the Russians to think of moving into, just as they did, the Soviet Union did before. So, I believe, ultimately, we need better borders in Europe, particularly amongst the Mediterranean flank, because if we do not secure Europe, we cannot empty Africa of people who would love to come here. If we don't have those borders and allow sensible immigration into Europe, if we don't do that, we are giving fuel to those populists who would destroy the idea of Europe. We should not be so stupid as to give our enemies the weapons with which to destroy us. At the same time, we should consider our experience in Europe as a wish to extend the frontier. It should be the other way out, that those places in Europe who have benefited from the success of the European Union should think about extending frontiers into those places, Africa, the Middle East, the frontier of the European idea. How good it would be if in 25 years, the Israelis, the Jews, and the Arabs did the European thing and so interconnected their economies and their states that war between them no longer became possible. And that's the bottom line for me. Just as we say, war between France and Germany is no longer possible in the European Union, that this dream becomes a reality as we extend the European frontier ever out. Thank you very much indeed.
Ačiū profesoriui Gleesui už įdomų pranešimą ir savotiškai diskusijos, kurią jau užmezgėme vakar pratęsimą.
Thank you, Professor Glees, for your very interesting presentation and also for, in a way, continuing the discussion that we already began yesterday.
Ir dabar metas jums įstoti į diskusiją su savo pastabomis, klausimais. Štai,
So now it's time for
prašau, Nikodemas,
the
ir tada
audience
jūs.
and
Thank you very much for the great speech. You mentioned very clearly the importance of ignorance question and the historical content several times.
Labai ačiū už įdomų pranešimą. Jūs kelis kartus paminėjote neišmanimo arba žinių stokos reikšmę šitame kontekste.
However, would you agree the importance of the ignorance issue also in the nowadays politics being the main source of the problems we have with the populist movement in Europe?
Ar sutiktumėte, kad tas neišmanimas arba neišprusimas taip pat yra šaknis populizmo problemų, kurias dabar turime Europoje?
I have been in Ireland for a couple of years, living in Dublin. And even being a stranger, I had a full understanding of the sensitivity of the question of the border between the Republic and the question of so-called six counties.
Aš keletą metų gyvenau Dubline ir net būdamas prašalaitis gerai supratau, kokie jautrus yra tie klausimai apie sieną ir apie tas vadinamas 6 grafystės, apie Šiaurės Airiją.
And how it could be possible that the voters, the citizens of the UK, particularly from the English part of the United Kingdom, would ignore and forgotten about the Good Friday agreements, about the importance of the six countries, and the impossibility to establish a border there.
Kaip gali būti, kad Didžiosios Britanijos piliečiai ir ypač pačios Anglijos, angliškojo krašto, galėtų pamiršti ir neįvertinti, kaip neįmanoma yra pastatyti sieną skiriančią Šiaurės Airiją nuo Airijos ir koks jautrus yra tų Didžiojo penktadienio sutarties ir tų apskritai tų 6 grafysčių klausimas.
Because theoretically we could understand the populism claims about everything what's come from the continent, as they called, but you cannot ignore the part of your own history, which is the Irish question.
Ir teoriškai galim suprasti, kad populizmas kyla kaip protestas ar pasipriešinant viskam, kas atplūsta iš žemynų, iš Europos, bet vis tiek negali pamiršti ir ignoruoti savo pačių istorijos.
Thank you very much.
Labai ačiū.
Well, thank you very much. That's, of course, a very good question and a very difficult question. We here are a meeting of intellectuals.
Labai ačiū, klausimas tikrai labai geras ir kartu labai sudėtingas. Čia mes susirinkome intelektualai, išsilavinę žmonės.
I have no doubt that the more knowledgeable you are, the less likely you are to believe that the reintroduction of a border in Ireland makes any sense at all.
Aš esu visiškai tikras, kad kuo labiau žmogus yra išsilavinęs ir išprusęs, tai tuo labiau jam aišku, kad vėl atkurti, atstatyti sieną tarp Airijos ir Šiaurės Airijos yra visiška nesąmonė.
But it is an inevitable consequence of Brexit.
Tačiau tai yra neišvengiamas Brexito padarinys.
Because two economic systems cannot exist in the same economic space.
Nes vienoje ekonominėje erdvėje negali sutilpti dvi skirtingos ekonominės sistemos.
If you ask me what I think will happen, I think that Boris Johnson will do a deal on this issue and there will be no hard border in Northern Ireland and Ireland will be treated differently from the rest of the United Kingdom. That's what I think will happen.
Jeigu manęs klaustumėte, kaip aš manau, kas bus, kas nutiks, tai aš sakyčiau, kad Borisas Johnsonas išsisuks ir sudarys tokią sutartį arba taip susitars, kad į tos vadinamos kietosios sienos arba fizinės sienos tarp Airijos ir Šiaurės Airijos nebus ir Airija bus traktuojama kitaip negu likusios Europos šalys.
Nobody thought about Northern Ireland during the Brexit debate.
Per Brexito debatus niekas nepagalvojo apie Šiaurės Airiją.
But a large majority of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union.
Bet labai didelė dauguma Šiaurės Airijos žmonių balsavo už tai, kad liktume Europos Sąjungoje.
So, if there is talk of a hard border, in my view, Ireland will be reunified or unified, depending on how you look at it. The people of Northern Ireland will want to be part of the Republic of Ireland.
Todėl jeigu jau kalbėsime apie tą kietąją sieną, tai aš manau, kad tai reikš, kad Airija bus suvienyta arba iš naujo suvienyta čia priklausomai nuo požiūrio. Nes aš manau, kad Šiaurės Airijos žmonės norės likti Airijos Respublikoje.
Could I say one more word about ignorance and understanding?
Aš norėčiau dar kai ką pridurti apie neišmanymą ir apie supratimą.
Opinion polls and political scientists show that the better educated you were, the younger you were, the less likely you were to vote for Brexit. The older you were, the less educated you were, the more likely you were to vote for Brexit.
Visuomenės nuomonių apklausos ir politologų tyrimai rodo, kad kuo jaunesnis žmogus ir kuo labiau išsilavinęs, tuo mažesnė tikimybė, kad jisai balsavo už Brexitą. Ir atvirkščiai, kuo vyresnis ir kuo mažiau išsilavinęs, tai tuo didesnė tikimybė, kad jisai balsavo už.
Okay, thank you very much for your great lecture, and I have a short comment regarding borders and the development of border systems.
Labai ačiū už puikią paskaitą. Aš turiu trumpą pastabą apie sienas ir sienų atsiradimą.
When the great Lithuanian migration started in the 1860s, people crossed more or less illegal the border to Prussia and then moved to the United States.
Kai prasidėjo didžioji lietuvių migracija 19 amžiaus vidury, 1870-metyje, žmonės illegally, did you say? Žmonės nelegaliai kirsdavo sieną į Prūsiją ir iš tenai plaukdavo į Jungtinės Amerikos valstijas.
And mainly they did it illegal because they had no money for passports and they waited until the border if there is a good point to good opportunity to cross it.
Ir dažniausiai jie tai darydavo nelegaliai dėl to, kad neturėdavo pinigų pasui susitvarkyti dokumentams ir jiems tiesiog pasitaikydavo gera proga kirsti sieną.
Very often they got first to Germany to work in the summer and then they were due to leave for the States because there was no opportunity to stay in Germany legal. But all times it was a good exit to go to United States.
Ir dažnai tie žmonės atvykdavo vasarai padirbti į Vokietiją ir tada išvykdavo į JAV dėl to, kad nebuvo galimybės legaliai pasilikti Vokietijoje ir pasitaikydavo proga išvažiuoti į Ameriką.
After World War I, this border region lost this significance because the decision place was only in the capitals. After World War I.
Po pirmojo pasaulinio karo šita siena prarado reikšmę, todėl kad sprendimai būdavo priimami iš sostinės.
And then we had until end of the century a system of paper wall. That means visa, decisions, permits who were issued in the capitals, in the embassies and in the consulates.
Ir tada atsirado vadinamoji popierinė siena, tai yra visų vizų, dokumentų ir kitokių popierių išduodamų sostinėse, ambasadose ir konsulatuose sistema.
And for instance, who want from Lithuania, from Soviet Lithuania, emigrate to the Western, he had first to go to Moscow and to clear it.
Ir jeigu kas nors, pavyzdžiui, iš sovietų Lietuvos norėdavo emigruoti kur nors į vakarus, tai turėdavo pirmiausiai keliauti į Maskvą, tvarkytis tų popierių.
But what we see today with the camps in Dover, the migrants camps in Dover, or the situation at the Mediterranean Sea,
Bet tai, ką matome šiandien, kai kuriasi migrantų stovyklos Doveryje ir visa situacija aplink Viduržemio jūrą.
and that's in my mind, in fact, in a return to the situation from the late 19th century.
Mano nuomonė, tai yra tam tikra prasme grįžimas į tą 19 amžiaus pabaigos situaciją.
And that means that the paper wall system, this paper wall finished, at least, and we have to think about new solutions.
Ir tai reiškia, kad šita popierinė sienos sistema nebeveikia, sugriuvo ir todėl mums reikia ieškoti naujų išeičių.
Thank you.
Ačiū.
Well, thank you very much. You say we have to think about a new solution.
Labai jums ačiū. Jūs sakote, kad reikia galvoti apie naujas išeitis.
And I agree with you. But what that solution might be, because if we do not control immigration, we fuel the Nazi right. And then they impose their own solution, which will be a final solution.
Ir aš pritariu, tik tai nežinau, koks galėtų būti tas sprendimas, nes mes privalom reguliuoti migrantų srautus, nes jie šeria ar kursto tą kraštutinę dešinę, kuri, jeigu įsigalės, tai tada primes savo išeitis ir tai bus nu tos vadinamos galutinės išeitis.
A year ago, I was invited to speak in the Cathedral of Münster in Germany.
Prieš metus buvau pakviestas kalbėti Münsterio katedroje Vokietijoje.
And I said that if Frau Merkel wished to be remembered by history,
Ir sakiau, kad jeigu ponia Merkel nori įeiti į istoriją,
milliards, billions of euros should be invested in Arab North Africa and in those African states where corruption allowed it to improve the situation of people in Africa and so reduce the pressure to immigrate. And I continue to think that is the only medium-term answer. The best schools, the best hospitals in Arab North Africa.
Reikia investuoti milijardus eurų į arabiškąją Šiaurės Afriką ir į tos kraštus, kur tik tai korupcija tai leidžia, visomis išgalėmis stengiantis pagerinti sąlygas ten, tam, kad sumažėtų poreikis emigruoti ar spaudimas emigruoti ir statyti. Ir aš manau, kad tai yra vienintelė vidutinio laikotarpio išeitis ir ten reikalingos geriausios mokyklos ir geriausios ligoninės ir tai yra vienintelis būdas šitą krizę spręsti.
My question is closely related to what you were speaking about right now, and I agree with you that it's a good policy to help develop African countries, but there is also the immediate pressure of the refugees flow right now.
Mano klausimas glaudžiai susijęs su tuo, ką tik sakėte, ir aš sutinku, kad reikia gerinti sąlygą Šiaurės Afrikoje, bet taip pat manau, kad yra poreikis mažinti patį pabėgėlių srautą dabar pat, iškart.
Bet tai yra problema.
Ir,
And I remember seeing a picture, I think it was from the Spectator magazine.
Ir atsimenu, mačiau tokį karikatūrą, ne? Man rodos iš Spectator žurnalo.
Where you could see the European warship facing off the refugee boat.
Kur europiečių karo laivas plaukė priešais pabėgėlių valtelę.
And the captain of this ship is holding a plate.
Ir laivo kapitonas laiko užrašą.
With the inscription, turn around or else.
Kuriam parašyta, apsisukit, plaukit savo, nes kitaip jums bus.
And I think it is a very good illustration of this problem. And I would like you to elaborate a little more on what is, in your opinion, the realistic way of securing the European border.
Ir man atrodo, kad yra labai gera šitos problemos iliustracija. Ir aš prašyčiau jūs truputį išsamiau pašnekėti apie tai, kaip jūs manot, kokie yra patikimi būdai apsaugoti Europos sienas.
And how to do this without discrediting our own culture and our own understanding of what is human and what is not.
Ir kaip tai padaryti, nediskredituojant mūsų pačių kultūros ir mūsų supratimo apie tai, kas žmoniška ir kas nežmoniška.
Well, I thank you for that question, and our humanity, our humaneness is one of the things that should define us as Europeans, and we should not use warships against ships full of refugees.
Ačiū už klausimą ir aš manau, kad mūsų žmoniškumas yra vienas iš dalykų, kurie mus daro europiečiais arba kurie apibrėžia mus kaip europiečius, ir manau, kad tikrai neturėtumėm siųsti karo laivų prieš pabėgėlių valteles.
But we have the right to protect our borders. We have that right. And I would repeat what I said here, that we should put money into Arab North Africa in particular, but also those African states with whom we can work to improve the situation. I know people will say it's colonialism and we shouldn't touch it, but I think that is the only answer. That if we don't do that, then those who love liberty and freedom will suffer at the hands of their own internal enemies, and we have no advantage in that. So that's why I say that. And
sorry, can I just... bet aš manau, kad mes turime teisę ginti savo sienas. Ir aš galiu tik pakartoti tai, ką jau sakiau, kad mes turim investuoti į arabiškąją Šiaurės Afriką ir kiek tik įmanoma į visas Afrikos valstybės, su kuriom mes galime dirbti, nes tik šitaip mes galim, ir kiti galbūt sakys, kad čia kolonializmas ir taip nereikėtų elgtis, bet tai yra vienintelis būdas ir mums patiems susisaugoti ir kartu apsaugoti tenykščius žmonės nuo vidinių priešų, vidinių prieštaravimų.
may I add one final word about the Chinese?
Norėčiau pridėti dar vieną pastabą apie kinus, kaip jau buvo pradėta šneka vakar.
The development of Chinese interests on the east coast of Africa
Kinijos interesų plėtra rytinėje Afrikos pakrantėje
is something that I think I'll be dead a long time, but in 50 years from now, the African problem will look quite different if the Chinese continue to colonize effectively, certainly the east coast of Africa. And that may be to the benefit of the people of Africa.
Ir jeigu kinai ir toliau kolonizuos bent jau tą rytinę pakrantę, tai po 50 metų Afrika ir Afrikos reikalai atrodys visai kitaip. Ir gali būti, kad Afrikos žmonėm tai išeis į naudą.
But the flame of European solidarity and peacefulness is flickering.
Bet europietiško solidarumo ir taikos, taikingumo liepsnelė tenai gęsta.
We must do nothing to let the far right in our own countries blow it up.
Ir nieko gyvo neturėtume leisti kraštutiniai dešiniai mūsų pačių šalyse jos užgesinti.
Thank you very much for your speech. And my question is, am I wrong thinking that this is exactly what David Cameron suggested when he was still in charge of Britain, to invest more into North Africa and the Middle East, and by this avoid the problems we are now having?
Labai ačiū. Mano klausimas yra apie tai, ar teisingai suprantu, kad maždaug tą patį siūlė Davidas Cameronas investuoti į Šiaurės Afriką tuo metu, kai jisai dar vadovavo Britanijos vyriausybei.
All I would say about David Cameron, whom I have met on a number of occasions,
Apie Davidą Cameroną, kurį esu susitikęs ne vieną kartą, galiu pasakyti tik tiek.
met him both because he was the MP of where my wife and I live.
Ir esam su juo susitikę, todėl, kad jisai buvo mūsų gyvenamosios vietos atstovas parlamente, parlamento narys iš mūsų gyvenamosios vietos.
But also on a national level, when I was the rapporteur of the security group of the European Ideas Network.
Bet taip pat esam susitikę ir nacionaliniu lygiu, kai buvau European Ideas Network, tokios organizacijos, kaip čia pasakyti, ataskaitos teikėjas įgaliotas pateikti ataskaitą.
I always found him to be conceited, incapable of listening, and with no real understanding of European or world affairs.
Man visada atrodė, kad jisai išpuikęs, nemoka klausytis ir iš tikrųjų nei kiek nesupranta nei Europos, nei pasaulio reikalų.
And of course, right now, he has just published his memoirs.
Ir kaip žinot, jisai ką tik išleido savo atsiminimus.
In Britain, people are saying David Cameron breaks his silence.
Britanijoje žmonės sako, Davidas Cameronas nutraukė tylą.
The comment on Twitter is, that's fine, he's broken everything else, why should he not break his silence?
Ir Twitteryje komentuojama, kad ir gerai, visą kitą jau sutraukė, tai dabar gali ir savo tylą nutraukti.
So I'm afraid that's not a very good answer to your question, but I have no faith or trust in Cameron. Cameron is a symptom of the British disease, not its cause.
Bijau, kad čia nėra labai geras atsakymas į jūsų klausimą. Aš Cameronu netikiu ir nepasitikiu ir manau, kad jisai yra Britanijos ligos simptomas, bet ne priežastis.
Professor Glees, first of all, I would like to thank you for your speech, and in my question I would like to combine the beginning of your speech about the borders and the end about the Brexit. So my question is, 300 years after uniting the Scottish and the English kingdoms, the Scotsmen still pay with their own pound notes like the Northern Irish. And then when they are traveling to England, they speak about traveling south the border. So the border is 300 years later still in their minds. And my question is, has the United Kingdom ever been a united kingdom? So that it might be much easier for English people to vote for leaving the European Union.
Ačiū už įdomų pranešimą ir norėjau paklausti, tarsi sujungdamas pranešimo pradžią ir pabaigą, prisiminiau Škotijos pavyzdį. Prieš 300 metų Škotijos ir Anglijos karalystės susivienijo ar susijungė, bet dar ir dabar škotai keliaudami į Angliją sako, kad važiuoja į pietus nuo sienos. Ir ta siena tarsi yra nulikusi galvoje ir kalboje dar ilgai po to. Ir už tai mano klausimas yra apie tai, ar tikrai galima sakyti, kad Jungtinė karalystė tikrai yra jungtinė. Ir galbūt dėl to Britanijos žmonėms yra lengviau nubalsuoti už išėjimą iš ES, nes jie yra pratę gyventi taip pusiau susivienyje.
If I may say so, like all the questions that you put to me this morning, that is an extremely good question.
Aš turiu dar kartą pasakyti, kaip ir visi klausimai, kuriuos girdžiu čia šį rytą, šitas taip pat yra labai puikus.
To go into the detail, Brexit is largely an English nationalist phenomenon. Certainly not Scottish, certainly not Northern Irish.
Jeigu pasigilintumėm, tai pamatytumėm, kad Brexitas labai aiškiai yra anglų tautinis reiškinys, tikrai ne škotų ir tikrai ne Šiaurės airių.
It is the result of a long failure on the part of the Westminster government to understand that there are places in the UK that are not called London.
Jisai atsirado dėl to, kad jau labai seniai Britanijos valdžia niekaip nesugeba suprasti, kad Jungtinėje karalystėje yra vietovių, kurios nesivadina Londonas.
It's an old saying that an ambassador is an honest man sent abroad to lie for his country.
Yra toks senas posakis, kad ambasadorius yra garbingas ar sąžiningas žmogus, išsiųstas į užsienį meluoti už savo šalį.
I hope that I'm honest, but I cannot come here to lie about my country.
Aš tikiuosi, kad esu sąžiningas žmogus, bet negaliu čia atvykęs meluoti apie savo šalį.
I do not know what will happen to Britain in the next 14 days.
Nežinau, kas nutiks Britanijoje per artimiausias 14 dienų.
I would not be surprised if Boris Johnson was no longer Prime Minister in 14 days.
Nenustebčiau, jeigu po 14 dienų Borisas Johnsonas nebebūtų ministras pirmininkas.
But I am sure that if we continue with Brexit, and it is a hard Brexit, then the Union, which is the United Kingdom, will be destroyed.
Bet aš esu tikras, kad jeigu įvyks tas vadinamasis kietasis Brexitas be sutarties, tai tada ta sąjunga, kurios pagrindų sudaryta Jungtinė karalystė, taip pat bus suardyta.
May I say one final word about Scotland?
Dar paskutinė pastaba apie Škotiją.
Many of our prime ministers in the United Kingdom have been Scottish.
Daugelis Jungtinės karalystės ministrų pirmininkų buvo škotai.
Many of our finest lawyers, our finest doctors in the UK are Scots.
Daugelis geriausių Jungtinės karalystės teisininkų ir daktarų irgi yra škotai.
The Scottish school system was brutal but very effective.
Škotiška mokyklų sistema buvo labai žiauri, bet labai veiksminga.
Scottish universities are the best in the world.
Škotų universitetai yra geriausi pasaulyje,
Apart from Oxford.
neskaitant Oksfordo.
And so I do see a development to independence for Scotland, perhaps as part of an Irish Sea confederation, an Irish Sea union. I'll be dead a long time, but I think that can happen. And excuse me, just to add on, we talked about China. If you've ever been to Hong Kong, the thing you notice, and certainly used to notice, was how many streets in Hong Kong had the names of Scottish people to them. How many of the banks, the businesses in Hong Kong were Scottish, not English.
Ir taigi aš matau prielaidas Škotijos nepriklausomybei ar galimybei Škotijai atsiskirti ir galbūt sudaryti kitą sąjungą Airijos jūros pagrindu ar kažkokia tokia, ir manęs tada tikriausiai jau seniai nebebus. Bet mes kalbėjome apie Kiniją ir jei kada nors esat buvę Honkonge, tai galima atkreipti dėmesį į tai, kiek daug gatvių yra pavadinta škotų vardais, bet ne anglų, pavardėm, tai prasme žmonių pavardėm.
And Her Majesty the Queen, the poor Queen at the moment, is 50% German and 50% Scottish.
Ir jos didenybė karalienė šiuo metu tikra vargšė yra pusiau vokietė ir pusiau škotė.
Yes, I would like to come back to one of the last statements where you have said that we need secure borders to save our values for the space.
Mikrofoną arčiau burnos laikyk. Norėjau paklausti apie pranešimo pabaigą, kur sakėte, kad mums reikia saugių sienų tam, kad apsaugotum savo erdvę.
Vertybės.
Ai, savo vertybės, atsiprašau. Aha.
Yes, and now in the world we have like the global race for technology, especially like China tries to be the dominant leader, but like the EU also has the statement that we want to be the innovation leaders globally.
Ir dabar pasaulyje vyksta technologijų lenktynės ir akivaizdžiai matom, kaip Kinija jose dalyvauja, bet ES taip pat turi tokį tikslą ar šūkį tapti technologijų ir inovacijų lyderė visam pasaulyje.
Yes, and basically China now outpasses us, like Europeans, in the artificial intelligence sector, just because they do not have such strong regulations for data privacy, bioethics, and so on. They are much more open, that's the reason why they go much faster in this field.
Ir šiuo metu Kinija lenkia ES tokiose srityse kaip dirbtinis intelektas ir panašiai. Dėl to, kad jie daug mažiau paiso etikos, bioetikos, privatumo ir visų panašių dalykų. Ir mūsų tarsi vertybinės nuostatos mus stabdo šiose lenktynėse.
Yes, and in Europe we have a lot of regulations. That is why we strangle ourselves and we stop ourselves. So,
Europoje turime labai daug tokių taisyklių ir todėl patys save užsismaugiame ir prisistabdome.
How to find the balance that we would save the values we have, but also do not lose this race, because if we lose this race, we will definitely go out of the big game.
Tai klausimas yra, kaip išsaugoti savo vertybės ir kartu nepralaimėti tokių lenktynių, nes jeigu jas pralaimėsime, tai tikrai iškrisime iš didžiojo žaidimo.
Again, that is a very good question.
Dar kartą, tai labai geras klausimas.
And it's interesting that you have to come to Lithuania to hear it.
Ir įdomu, kad reikia atvykti į Lietuvą, kad jį išgirstum.
I know that you in Lithuania have done a great deal to meet the challenges of the information age.
Žinau, kad Lietuvoje yra nudirbta labai daug darbų, stengiantis priimti technologijų informacijos amžiaus iššūkius.
We have not done it in Britain, although we were the country that invented the computer.
Britanijoje to nėra padaryta, nors tai mes esam ta šalis, kuri išrado kompiuterį.
And don't forget, the computer was invented for intelligence purposes.
Ir nepamirškite, kompiuteris buvo išrastas žvalgybos tikslams.
So what you're drawing attention to is the dissonance between a globalizing world and the growth of nationalism and a desire to protect oneself from globalization.
Taigi tai, ką jūs atkreipėte dėmesį, yra troškimas apsisaugoti, išsilaikyti globalėjančiame pasaulyje ir kartu neatsilikti nuo globalizacijos proceso.
And the resolution of this dissonance is possible, but only with great difficulty.
Ir tokius nesuderinamus dalykus įmanoma suderinti, bet tik tai labai sunkiai, labai sudėtingai.
I can be a cheat and say it's for your generation.
Aš galėčiau išsisukinėti ir sakyti, kad tai jūsų karta turi to imtis.
But what I would say is, at the moment, we have the wild west of the internet, unregulated.
Bet aš sakyčiau, kad šiuo metu internete yra laukiniai vakarai, kur niekas nėra reguliuojama, nėra jokios tvarkos.
Manipulated by your neighbor down the road.
Ir jo manipuliuoja jūsų kaimynai čia netoliese.
and manipulated by the sex and fraud gangs.
Ir manipuliuoja sekso ir, kaip čia pasakyti, ir seksualiniam paslaugom ir visokiam kitokiam nesąžiningais dalykais užsiimančios gaujos.
Many of them also down the road from here.
Iš kurių taip pat daugelis yra čia pat netoliese.
But in other places as well. And we have to find a way of regulating but promoting. To be a village but also a global village. And I don't know what the answer is. But if we don't regulate, then we will be destroyed by the monster that Frankenstein has developed.
Ir aš manau, kad reikia surasti būdą, kaip reguliuoti, bet neužtildyti, toliau skatinti, kaip būti kaimo ir kartu pasauliniu kaimu. Bet nežinau, kaip tą padaryti, bet jeigu iš vis nereguliuos, neįvesim jokių taisyklių, tai mūsų sunaikins šitas Frankensteinas, kuris šitaip atsirado, šitaip susikūrė.
The Brexit movement has two completely different parts to it.
Brexito sąjūdis yra sudarytas iš dviejų visiškai skirtingų dalių.
Those people who want Britain to have literally a border with the rest of the world as well as with Europe.
Žmonių, kurie tiesioginė prasme pageidauja, kad Britanija turėtų sieną su visu pasauliu ir įskaitant Europą, su Europą.
And those people who want Britain to be Singapore on the Thames.
Ir žmonių, kurie nori, kad Britanija būtų Singapūras prie Temzės.
And they cannot exist together. You have free trade with everybody, like Singapore, or you protect yourself in your home borders.
Ir tai nesuderinama. Arba gali palaikyti laisvosios prekybos santykius su visais, kaip daro Singapūras, arba turi apsistatyti sienomis ir sieną saugoti.
So your generation has got to have the answer.
Todėl atsakymą turės surasti jūsų karta.
Thanks, Professor. Glees, to your last sentences about the internet, free and not regulated. The French President Macron has this idea that we have to construct a European Google, a European Facebook, European YouTube. Do you think that it would be possible?
Kadangi čia paskutinius porą sakinių prašnekome apie internetą, aš prisiminiau, kaip Prancūzijos prezidentas Emmanuelis Macronas pasiūlė, kad reikėtų sukurti europietišką Google ir europietišką internetą. Tai norėjau paklausti, ar jūs manot, kad tai įmanoma?
I understand what Macron would like to do, and I understand too that it can be done. In China, we talked about it. You don't like what's on the internet, you turn the switch off. It is easily done.
Aš suprantu, ką Macronas nori pasakyti, ir suprantu, kad tai yra padaroma, kaip pavyzdžiui, Kinijoje, kur yra vienas mygtukas internetui įjungti ir išjungti.
But I would say the deeper conceptual point is between the Wild West and regulation.
Bet aš sakyčiau, kad tokia gilesnis, svarbesnis dalykas čia yra kalbėti apie laukinius vakarus ir tvarkos įvedimą.
I believe in regulation.
Aš tikiu reguliavimu, tvarkos įvedimu.
Regulation makes the lives of citizens more secure, more safe.
Tvarka suteikia daugiau saugumo piliečių gyvenimui.
Not everything can be allowed.
Ne viską galima leisti.
Some people are repugnant.
kai kurie žmonės yra atgrasus.
But liberty is also key.
Bet taip pat, esminė labai svarbi yra ir laisvė.
So, I would argue, enlightened European regulation is the answer to the internet problem. And it is a real problem. In your country, I imagine, certainly in the United Kingdom, that the power of Google, YouTube, Twitter, that is a power that must be restrained. All power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That was an Englishman that said that.
Todėl aš manau, kad išeitis yra įvesti tvarką internete ir tokios bendrovės kaip Google yra labai galingos ir visi žinom tą posakį, visa valdžia gadina, absoliuti valdžia gadina absoliučiai. Ir taip pasakė taip pat anglas.
Kągi, šiais Lord Actono žodžiais, manau, ir baigiame šią pirmąją sesiją ir dabar lauksime jūsų visų Eduardo Jonušo namuose. Na, o priminsiu dar 1:30 pietus senąją